Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 196. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have back with us the talented and internationally acclaimed comic creator, Andre Owens.
Hey, hello. Internationally acclaimed. I like that.
That's true, though. It is true.
Well,
you are internationally acclaimed.
It may be true, but I like to hear it. Feed my ego again.
And you're here. You're here to talk about your latest Kickstarter, the Hollywood Afenders. Huh?
Yeah, Hollywood Afenders. So the Hollywood Afenders. That's an interesting title because it's Afenders. And before this story ever came about, Afenders was the comic I made up as a child. When I was a kid, it was neither the Avengers or the Defenders. They were the Afenders, and they were kind of like the Legion of Superheroes. But the most interesting thing about the Afenders is that they eventually became the comic that got me started in the comics. I turned to my comic Force Galaxia 20 years ago. So basically the same characters, just updated. It's like everybody that's in this this comic book world. We all grew up reading comics, and we all wanted to eventually make our own. And some of us do it, and some of us don't. But there's a lot of people independently doing it now, which is fantastic for us all.
Right. So talk to us a bit about this. Talk to us a bit about the Hollywood Afenders. What can people expect from this Kickstarter?
Okay. So the Hollywood Afenders is like a Game of Thrones situation on a Hollywood Boulevard that's divided into 7 kingdoms. So in this world, there are the costume impersonators who have the most valuable territory right in front of Grauman's Chinese Theater, where most of the tourists come, and that's where they can make their money. But there are other factions. There's the CD guys. They're always throwing. We go to places and they're trying to get the CDs. There's the cosmetologists, which is our take on the Scientologists. We didn't want to get sued, so we have the cosmetologists who want to give you a makeover audit. So they're always trying to get people to do that. And there's 4 or 5 other sanctions. So within the story context, there was a time when there was a great battle of Hollywood Boulevard. And so we see that in the beginning of the graphic novel. We see a prelude, and we see this battle between all the different factions. We have like the Christian guys against the Black Israelites who are fighting each other, and so there's in the story a Pam Grier costume impersonator. She unites the entire boulevard under a treaty. So fast forward, this is many years later, and the boulevard's just functioning. But Hollywood Boulevard in this world is not like the Disney-fied version that it's actually become. It's more like 1978 New York. So it's gritty, and it's kind of like, what am I saying? It's kind of like Hollywood now, because there's a lot of homeless people in this story too. So that there's the homeless gang. So there's all these factions, and within the context, a group of costume impersonators have to come together, and they decide they're led by a woman called the Chicken, which is Deborah Ann Choi. Now, Deborah Ann Choi is a Korean American woman from Olive Branch, Mississippi. So she has a Southern accent. She works at the local bong store at the corner of Hollywood and Hollywood and Cahuenga. Anyway, so she realizes one day that she's smoking away all of her profits, and she sees the costume impersonators, like an Elvis impersonator, out there making a bunch of money. So she says, "Well, geez, I got to do that." So she decides she's got this chicken outfit that her parents had at this chicken restaurant in Olive Branch, Mississippi. So she starts wearing that and becomes a costume impersonator. And along the way, she runs into 4 other costume impersonators. Philadelphia Del Thursday, who is a Latino guy from Bakersfield, who comes in as an Uber driver for the streets of Hollywood. And he costume plays as this character, Major Universe. So he does both. Yeah, exactly. So we have him. Then we have Janelle Mason, who's a Black woman, but she's been costume playing as Madonna for about 40 years on the boulevard. So she's like the mother of the boulevard. She knows everyone. And she's always in a different Madonna costume. Then we have Michael J., who's a costume impersonator that's been portraying Michael Jackson so long, but he doesn't want to portray him any longer. But he's been portraying him so long, all of his costumes involve Michael Jackson. So he's like a vampire, but he looks like Michael Jackson with vampire teeth. So that's the Michael J. And then finally, the last member is Norma Jean. And Norma Jean is supposedly the love child of Marilyn Monroe and JFK's love child. So she's a character that's been around the boulevard a long time too. So these 5 costume impersonators have to get together because they realize there's this guy named Johnny Tommy, and he's our villain. Johnny Tommy's our villain, and he goes by the name Lil Colt. Now, Johnny Tommy's history is he was born of the first celluloid of Edison, when Edison first brought the kinescope to alive. Johnny Tommy birthed himself out of the first element of celluloid, and he became this child star. He was born at the age of 12, and he's perpetually the age of 12. And that was 140 years ago. So he's been in a series of these movies called Low Colt, and it's all okay. There's been hundreds of these movies: Low Colt versus the FBI, Low Colt versus the Klan, Low Colt in World War II. There's just hundreds of movies he's made over the years as Low Colt. But now his power is starting to wane because he was born of celluloid, and it's a digital era. So he decides he wants to make a film make a film starring himself that he produces out of film, but needs to crowdfund it, and he has no way to do it. So he enlists all these people that are the number twos in society, like Tonto to the Lone Ranger, or Robin to Batman, and he enlists them as costume impersonators to rob the citizens of Hollywood and the tourists of Hollywood Boulevard particularly. So the costume offenders, the 5 offenders, find this out, and they form a group. They form the Offenders, and they use the exact same logic I did. They were like, well, how about we call ourselves Avenge? And it's like, nope, copyright. How about Defend? No, can't do that one either. So then it's, hey, Offenders. So they decide they're gonna stop this maniacal child star Johnny Tommy, and that's what the plot ensues them going on an adventure to all the different kingdoms on Hollywood Boulevard to try to find the prophecy that they've heard from Tres Hermanas, who are the hot dog ladies of Hollywood Boulevard, who give out cryptic advice. So then the plot goes to them. I'm not going to reveal everything, but it goes to them having a confrontation with Johnny Tommy, and it's hilarity ensues.
So is this, we talked earlier in your previous interviews about your different, whereas you have Bovine Leagues and Force Galaxia. Is this part of the same universe, or is this part of the Stone Age universe?
In my mind, it's part of the Stone Age is part of this universe also. In my mind, everything's this part of this universe. So Force Galaxia and the Bovine League take place somewhere distant in the future. I never say where it is. I just say my cliche I use, or the trope I use, is some time from now. Instead of once upon a time, I say sometime from now, X happens, So that's all in the future. The Stone Age took place, in what is now the past, so that took place in the past. So this Hollywood Offenders is the middle ground between the two so far. And in Hollywood Offenders, the store that Debran Choi works at is called the Stone Age, and one of the characters, me, Andre, is the manager of this new pot store on Hollywood Boulevard.
And so who did you have as the artist for the Hollywood Offenders? So the artist for Hollywood Offenders is this really incredible guy named Alan St. Clark. I saw his work around the internet, and I was like, man, it's fantastic, because he's got a style. He's got a style that's perfect for what the story's trying to say. It's not too cartoony, it's not too realistic, it's not too superhero-y. It's just he's got a great style, to pull this off. Not to toot my own horn, but one of my strengths as a comic book creator is finding the right artist for the right project. You know what I mean? So once I can do that, you can see all of the characters there, and he does all kind of background work, and he's really one of the co-creators of the book at this point, because he's contributed so much to it. So there's me, David Lyle Johnson, who's one of the other writers on it. My friend David is a writer on it also, and Alan, and we're all I'm giving credit to all of us as co-creators, because we've all come up with it together. And how long is the series going to run for?
It's a standalone 64-page book, one standalone graphic novel. We intend to have other volumes if this one's successful. We want to continue the story of Little Colt and the Hollywood Offenders. So it's the great thing about the Hollywood Offenders. It's one of those things. It's a love letter to Hollywood in a way. Much like La La Land was a love letter to L.A. This is a love letter to Hollywood, how much we enjoy it, but just, we just wanted to tweak it a little bit and, turn it on its ear and see what was, see what could be underneath it, was if you just saw the underbelly all the time.
Right. Now, for those that when this Kickstarter, with the Kickstarter, what are some of the benefits you see for people that aren't familiar with some of the Hollywood tropes? What would they get out of it?
Oh, I think they'll be thrilled, because it's not all just about, Hollywood tropes. It's a very universal story. Okay. About it's a general story. Bad guy has a plan. Good guys come together, good guys are thwarted, good guys come back together, defeat bad guy. It's a
Right.
very, very simple story. It's just set within this environment, and the benefit will be people who do know Hollywood or do know Hollywood history. They'll get this benefit of knowing that, oh, they made a reference to Some Like It Hot, or or whatever the reference may be at that time. Like some of our rewards on the Kickstarter are fantastic, where it's like we name like each level, like there's Lil Colt versus the Odessa Steps, as a throw to the Battleship Potemkin. Lil Colt versus the Wizard of Oz producers is a level. The Maltese Colt is a level. Play It Again, Lil Colt. Gentlemen Prefer Lil Colt. And then we have a series of them called A Fistful of Lil Colts, for a few little Colts more. The Good, the Bad, and the Low Colt. And then the one of the higher tiers is Lil Colt versus Hal, A Space Odyssey. And then Mario Puzo's The Little Colt's Father. So, and on and on. So we're amping Hollywood in a way. If you know it, if you know movies, you'll really like it. So I think fans of movies are going to really like this book too. But if you don't know anything about Hollywood, don't know anything about the movies, you're still going to get a great run, because it's a funny, fantastic story involving a lot of really interesting characters.
No, because you mentioned this was from your first idea when you had you created the Afenders before.
Yes.
Now my question for you is like how much of this is the same, or how much of this is different from your original idea?
This is not this is the thing that's similar to my original creation of Afenders is Force Galaxia. It literally has the exact same characters that I created as a kid. And I just updated them updated them when I was going to do my own series. So that's the book that actually is Afenders. But I always wanted to use the title, but I didn't want to call my original book Afenders, because people are like, what the hell, you misspelled that, or what's going on? But this led perfectly to it, because David and I were actually living together during the pandemic. Luckily, I wasn't alone during lockdown, and me and David and his wife Daphne. But we came up with this just sitting around talking. I was telling him about ideas I had, and we bounced a bunch of other ideas off of each other. We've written some other stuff, and this has been the one that I think was the one we were both most excited to do.
So how long did it take you to get this book together then?
Oh, we've been working on it for a while. I mean, we started writing it, like I said, back in sometime in 2020 when we first decided to start writing it. And I've been working on it ever since, getting the script exactly where we want, and getting Alan to start doing preliminary artwork, doing some of the art, some of the pages and stuff. So it's been a while to get that. But we're doing a Kickstarter so that we can pay Alan, even though he is a partner. I believe in paying artists, even if they're coming on as full partners. It's just something, I know a lot of people don't, but it's just something I believe in. So we're raising the money to pay him, and then to pay for printing. We're trying to get $9,000. That's a lot. And I've never raised that much on a Kickstarter, but I'm hoping that we can pull this together and do it.
So compared to your other projects, what are some of the things that you've learned from your previous projects that will really help with your success of this one?
Okay, the main thing I learned is to build an audience before the Kickstarter. And the reason I'm able to have an audience built now is I have a really good mailing list that I've collected over the years from going to conventions, and from previous Kickstarters, and from other, I've just got a good mailing list. So building that first is something that I learned, because my first two Kickstarters were failures. I didn't have the audience to do it. The first one I got close, but I didn't know what I was doing really. The second one I just did too quickly and didn't put enough effort behind it. Now the third one I did was Bovine League #1. So like with Bovine League #1, I took all the lessons I had learned before and combined it with a lot of advice from other successful Kickstarter people, particularly Russell Nohelty, who's a wealth of information, and he has a lot of different platforms that you can pay for to get his advice, and I think it's really worth it. So I took that, and the success of Bovine League #1 led to last year's Sisters of Power #1. And and I took all the lessons of that, which we had better mailing lists, and was able to succeed in that one too. And actually, Barney, I must say, both of those were after I went on your show. So maybe Storycomic is the key to me getting successful Kickstarters. I think that's it. That's what it is. It's you.
Well, I can help out as much as I can.
Well,
I did read Your Sisters of Power. Their Sisters of Power was a really good comic, and now I'm excited for issue number 2 to that.
Yeah, well, Sisters of Power issue number 2 is written actually. So the cool thing about Sisters of Power number 2, I'll just go on a tangent a bit, is that so I made up Sisters of Power based back in the 90s. And they were based on my character MG, whose name was Muscle Girl in the Afenders, the original Afenders. So she was the leader of this group of women. And it was cool. I was writing it, but I always felt kind of weird. It's like, I should have a woman writer. I should get a woman writer. I've been doing this, And so Sisters of Power number 1 was co-written by my friend. I think we came on the show. John Crosby was, we co-wrote that. So for Sisters of 2, I reached out to a talented writer I know named Isis Clines, a woman from, I believe she's in Atlanta. But she's young, and hungry and really talented. So I hooked her up with John, and they actually wrote issue 2. And I did was do, I did some, editor in chief work, but I turned it over to them, and I want them to run it. So I've got a queue of Kickstarter. So I've got a Hollywood Afenders here, and then I want to do my Omegan Chronicles, which has been over 20 years in the making. I'll tell you about that at another time. But it's my baby that I've been making since 1998. So. It's 230 pages. All the artwork's done. I just need a small Kickstarter to pay for the printing. So I want to do that, and then we'll do Bovine League number 2, and then Sisters of Power number 2. So I've got a few things lined up I want to do, and if we get really successful with this one, I'll plug the extra money into the next project. My whole thing is, look, I'm not going to get rich doing this. I'm not in it to sell IPs. I just have stories I want to tell. And if I get rich off of it, or if I sell it as an IP, that's bonus, and that's great, But that is the main goal. I know some people's goal is that. The main goal for me is just to tell the stories I want to tell.
Is there any other? Because every time we're talking about Bovine League, the Afenders, the Forest Galaxia, is all based off of character concepts and IPs you created when you were much younger.
No. Yeah, not all of them were younger. Mostly Force Galaxia. The main 5 characters in that are from when I was younger. But like Bovine League is totally from a vacation I took to Switzerland, and I bought a coffee mug. Yeah, so the Swiss are like a lot of countries. They're good with cows. There are cows everywhere. And so I bought this coffee mug that had like all the cows, like all the cantons within Switzerland represented as cows. And they had like their colors, like the color of their little canton. So I remember even when the first got it, I was drinking coffee. I was like, that's an interesting idea. So I didn't think about it. And then years later, I was like, I want to do a new comic. And I was like, I'm going to do this new comic. What should I do? And I was like, Bovine League. And some of these cows from that coffee mug. So I literally chose 8 different cantons. I thought it sounded cool. I only vacationed in Switzerland. I don't know anything about it. So, it's like, it's probably like some, Swiss guy making a series called Texas and, North Carolina. And so I named all the characters after the canton that on the mug. So, we have St. Gallen, and there's Geneva and Zurich, just all these different characters. So that's where Bovine League came from. So, yeah, ideas come out of everywhere. The Stoned Age came out of me working at the Bong store in the late 90s and wanting to tell about the first day I worked there because it was so weird, And so, the ideas come from different places.
So do you have any other concepts from earlier in your life that you're excited to start creating and remaking again?
Yeah, actually, I had this thing, and it's funny. It's called the Rainbow Team I had. Now, I'm not gay, but I'd like to find a gay writer to take over the Rainbow Team. And I never intended Rainbow Team to be a gay center team, but just the title of it makes it go like, well, it's got to be a gay center team, And so I'd like to find a writer to do that. So I'm doing that. There's other stories within. We want to do Hollywood Afenders Volume 2, where Johnny Tommy has been sent to prison and he comes out, really muscular, but he takes off the muscle suit and his belly flops out. He becomes a 12-year-old kid again, so it's like, there's a lot of things I'd like to do. And of course I'm still writing, screenplays and working on that kind of stuff, trying to get TV shows done and, advancing my career that way. I've made some good connections at different studios that I send stuff over to them every now and again. I try to send, people that I know, like with, that they have good product, I try to send them to, because like, what I've realized is a lot of these studios are trying to, ape Marvel or Warner Brothers, and they want their own superhero universe, even though I believe it's probably getting oversaturated at this moment. But, a lot of these studios still are looking for that, So And there's been a lot of, and what's really cool for me as a black indie creator is how many black comics are getting optioned or sold, into stuff. So, a lot of my contemporaries have a lot of stuff going right now. It's a wonderful time to be an indie creator.
What advice would you give to a indie comic creator to get above the noise of all the other comic creators?
That's hard. The main thing, you got, look, okay. You got to have perseverance. You know what I mean? So that's one of the things that you have to have. You got to keep at it. You can't, I've been doing this over 20 years, and publishing since 2005. So I'm doing that 17 years. And I plan to continue to do it, and because I believe in what I'm doing, so you got to have perseverance. And then, like everything else, you got to have relationships. You know what I mean? Like if you're doing your indie product, you've got to, build relationships with people like you or other podcasters I talk to, or, stores or distributors. Unfortunately, we had, I think I probably told you about the distribution company I had the last time. It was a Black Indie Comics distro. Unfortunately, we had to put that on hiatus. So financially, we couldn't make it going. But, there's many ways to get your stuff out there. So, relationships. And then, like everything, you got to have luck, or, which is opportunity. You know what I mean? You got to have that. And it's not going to come all the time, and you never know when it's going to come, or it may never come. But you got to have that. And then the main thing, I think, if you get all those things working for you, you've worked out a hard time. You've got, you've made the connections, and you've gotten luck. You've got, like, someone at Marvel editor wants to see it. You got to have talent. You can't, you can't just be some jackass after that. I mean, you can be, and we see it all the time. But in my mind, you got to have some kind of talent to back up all that other stuff. Otherwise, it's just, false bravado.
Right. And so what can people expect from the Kickstarter? You mentioned some tier levels.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll tell you. Yeah. So we got, so at the main level, so we have, the early levels, level 5 or $5 level, low quote in motion. You'll get a thank you within the book. There'll be a page thank you within the graphic novel. Level $10 level, low quote versus the Odessa steps. Don't want to let that baby carriage get to the bottom. That's the PDF. So you get a PDF copy of the whole book. $15, the low quote versus Wizard of Oz producers. You'll get the PDF plus 9 Hero Unlimited PDFs. So all of the previous books I've done, you get all of that for $15. And then $25, you get the physical copy of the book plus all previous stuff. So you get that, and then it advances up from there. Where there's some posters available that'll come available. More PDFs are available at higher rates. What do we have here? We have another poster by a great artist, Keithan Jones, and that's going to be available at a higher rate also. We're giving away print copies of. Then we at the $100 level, for a few quotes, a little more, we start giving out print copies of the previous Hero Unlimited books. So you get Force Galaxia 1, 2, and 3. For a little more, you'll get Bovine League 0, 1, and the Hero Unlimited one-shot Bessel, which features a Bovine League member. So, in advance, you'll get more and more things. You'll get at $150, you'll end up getting all 9 physical copies of Hero Unlimited's book, plus the posters, plus the new Hollywood Afenders book. So, and then they go up from there. We have a level where you can get drawn into the book. There's 5 of those available at $300. We'll draw you or your loved one or whoever you want into this new Afenders book. So you'll be there right away. At $500, we have 3 different tiers. One is they're different Zoom sessions. So one is an hour Zoom session with Jeff Howard, screenwriter of Oculus, Before I Wake, Haunting of Hill House, Gerald's Game. This year's I Know What You Did Last Summer series. So you'll get an hour with him. Also, there's an hour with Daryl Lamont Wharton Rigby, who's an indie comic creator who lives in Japan. He's a black comic creator, indie filmmaker that lives in Japan. He's a black filmmaker from Baltimore originally. And you'll get an hour session with him to learn all the ins and outs of how to make an indie comic or an indie film.
Wow.
He just did this great thing, a movie called Stay, and he shot it all in Japan and all in Japanese. There's some little English that goes in there, but Daryl's lived there many years. He's married and has children in Japan, so he's very into the culture. And it's a terrific little film. So if you get a chance, look it up. Stay by Daryl Wharton. So at that, and then we have one last $500 tier, and that's me. So you get an hour Zoom session with me, and I'll tell you all the ins and outs about, comic creating, about, filmmaking that I know about being a director of photography, whatever you want to talk about. I can talk to you about indie filmmaking. I can talk about commercials. I can talk about, we have a bunch of tiers available, a bunch of rewards for everyone.
And so what, looking at this, what are some things that are different from your previous Kickstarters tiers that you wanted to try this time around?
Oh, well, this time I added more, at the higher levels, I had more books at the higher levels instead of at a lower level, and added things like at $200 at Mario Puzo's The Little Colt's Father. You get all the books, all 10 books. You get all the PDFs, and you also get a hardcover Hollywood Offenders journal. So we're adding things like that. We have there's add-ons that you can do of T-shirts, of a coffee mug. Things that you can, if you want to add on to the rewards, and that just cost you a little more. So basically this time I've offered more physical copies of the book than I had in the past.
And in your previous tiers, you didn't have those.
Yeah, actually, in the previous one I did, Jeff actually gave up. My friend Jeff Howard, the screenwriter, did an hour Zoom for me then, and it was the same. It was the same situation. So yeah, and then there was because he knows a lot of people, so he's able to get people want to do it. But his screenwriters, I'm also friends with Mike Flanagan, the horror director. Me and Jeff and Mike, we all went to the same university, and we used to hang out together back in the mid-aughts, watching movies and stuff when Mike was just editing car commercials. But the cool thing is, what I'm hoping for this campaign is, Mike is well known now, and he has 300,000 followers on on Twitter, and I talked to him. I was like, hey, will you tweet out my my thing? He's like, sure. So I'm like, well, if I could just get 0.5% of his 300,000 followers, I'll be doing really good.
Right.
So so that's but once again, it goes back to what I was saying though. It's relationships. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I've known this guy for 20 years, and I've never asked a favor of him. He's just a friend of mine. It's just and when he offered to do it, it's like, well, of course I want your help, but and it's the main thing I take away about it in the entertainment business is I think there was a time when you used to be an asshole. We see it with even back in the 90s. You could be what they call a joyful rogue or something. Someone that you're a bad guy, but everyone likes you anyway, and a womanizer or whatever. But I don't think you can do that anymore, and I think you get called on that stuff now. So I think building those relationships is much more important now than maybe it was back then, when you could burn bridges and still succeed. I see even in the comic world, there's all kind of controversies that go. I'm not one to speak on it because I'm not involved in it, but there's a controversy goes on with different artists and different creators doing this, or someone screwing someone on a Kickstarter. Like you would expect with anything. You know what I mean?
Right.
That there's this negative side to it. I mean, that's one of the things why, so for the Hollywood Offenders, the artwork is not done yet. So Alan needs to work on the book. So that's why the delivery date's not until the 2023. It's going to give him time to work on the book and get it done, so that I don't have people waiting for the delivery. Now, some of my other stuff, like Omegan Chronicles, which I plan to do next, that'll deliver earlier because all the artwork's done, and I just need to print. So,
right.
Barney. Sorry, go ahead.
You did mention earlier that the add-ons are different this time around too.
Yeah. I've added 2 T-shirts, a mug, and I believe we have another journal in there, a spiral journal as add-on.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm learned, like you said, when you asked me earlier what I've learned, it's another thing I've learned is that put these things out here, and if you get one person doing it, that's fantastic. That's another $40 or whatever. So right. It all if I get a lot of little guys and a couple big guys, things will work out really well for us.
Right. But that's awesome. I mean, so the Hollywood Offenders, it's a great concept. Now, how long did it take you from tweaking the idea from the first inception of the idea had to actual finalized script?
Well, so we started talking about it. When was it? I guess February 2021, and we finished the script by June, I think. So it was about a 3 or 4 month process, and then then I started looking around for an artist, and I thought about Alan. Then Alan did some sketches for us, stuff you can find on the Kickstarter once it goes live. You'll see, of the characters, and then we've just been working on developing it since then. Went back. When I write, you edit, you change things, and you may add stuff. I mean, like right at this moment, I'm still adding stuff because Alan hasn't finished, hasn't started on certain parts of the book. So there are things where I'm like, we need to add this, we need to do that. So it's still an ongoing process until the very last moment, to be honest with you. I'm like my artist that's working on Bovine League #2, Christian. He's been busy on that, and it's the same type of process. Where he may do something where I'm like, I don't quite like that. It's twitched in a different way. But for Hollywood Offenders, I've given it a long leeway so we can make sure that we can deliver on time.
Right.
I don't want someone waiting. I don't want to say some delivering in February and knowing the artist is going to finish.
Right.
That's the thing about it. I mean, a lot of these guys that we're working with as independents, unless you made a really successful Kickstarter and you got a boatload of money, they're working cheap. So they probably got other things they have to do. I mean, I know a lot of people go like, oh, he'll do it for X amount of money. It's like, yeah, well, think about. He's got to work on that for 5 hours, and you're giving him $50. That works out to $10 an hour.
Right.
It's like I can't do that to people. You know what I mean? I just can't do that. So
right. And so, what would be your advice then for comic creators who are looking to hire artists like that? What would and I know in your previous episode you had some advice, but just to recap some of those advice that you would give.
Well, I'd say know your story. Know your story. Know your ending particularly. I'm not saying you have to know the exact thing that happens, but know your ending particularly, because I think in my mind, when you're looking at an artist, you want to see if he can draw, know your ending. As a writer, know your ending. And then when you're evaluating artists, don't just stand with pin-ups. If you get, if someone sends you, if you're, ask for artwork from someone and they're sending you just pin-ups and you want a sequential artist, you can't really take them. You need to see the actual sequential work, and you want to see that they can tell a story in their sequential artwork. But you want to find the right artist for the right project. You know what I mean? Like the guy that does Bovine League wouldn't have been good for Hollywood Offenders. His artwork's too clean and too nice. Alan's artwork's perfect because he'll have a bum peeing on the corner. Where some artists won't even think about doing that. So it's what's good for me, what I've realized with artists working with him, you get this simpatico thing going where it's like you start knowing like, okay, I know this guy likes to draw, things this way. So let me start, writing to that strength, or, finding the artist that's, but, you got to be realistic too. You can't be going into it going like, I want you to draw like, Mobius, and I'm paying you $50, you got to be realistic about, you pay what you get what you pay for, in every way.
Right. Yeah. Well, perfect. I'm really excited to check out and follow Hollywood Offenders.
Yeah, I hope a lot of people
fan of your stuff, Andre. So
thanks, Barney. I mean, you've been, it's so funny. I don't know how I actually ever met you, but you've been so supportive over the years of everything I've done. So, I really appreciate it. I really, really do.
Yeah, you're welcome. So yeah, and thanks again for coming on. And now you're going to have to come on to talk about your next project.
Yes, hopefully maybe in a few months I can come back and talk about Omega Chronicles.
There you go. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much.
All right, guys.
All right. Sorry about that.
That's all right, man. Yeah, no worries. You got a family, man. That's it.
Well, what I do is I have the downstairs basement. I lock it, so then when I get recording, but my wife needed the packing tape because she's putting away the kiddie pool for the season. So
there you go.
Yeah,
I understand.
Yeah.
Hey.
All right. So what was this?
I was saying about about what lessons I've learned on previous Kickstarters. Right. With